The temperature outside was 15 degrees. Inside my house, it was dropping just as fast. And the worst part? It wasn't a power outage. It wasn't a broken furnace. It wasn't an accident. My HOA did it. On purpose. It started with a soft click. That tiny mechanical sound your thermostat makes when it tells the furnace to kick on. Except this time, nothing happened. No hum, no airflow, no comforting rush of warm air through the vents. Just silence. I checked the thermostat, set to 72 degrees Celsius. Indoor temp, 64 degrees, dropping. I walked to the basement and checked the furnace panel. No blinking error lights. No breakers tripped. Gas line valve? Open. Everything looked normal, except it wasn't running. That's when my phone buzzed. An email notification from the HOA. Subject line, Utility Compliance Action Executed. I opened it. It was short, cold, professional. Due to unresolved compliance violations and unpaid fines totaling $480, the association has authorized temporary suspension of gas service to your unit effective immediately. Temporary suspension of gas at 15 degrees. My violation? Failure to remove a non-approved exterior structure. The structure? A small metal storage rack on my patio, holding firewood, not visible from the street, not blocking anything, but apparently, according to the HOA's architectural committee, it violated aesthetic guidelines. So instead of a warning, instead of a hearing, instead of a payment plan, they shut off my gas. For context, I lived in a townhouse community of 42 homes, shared walls, shared utility infrastructure, but individually owned units. Important detail. Very important. Each home had its own gas meter, but all meters were located in a locked utility enclosure behind the clubhouse. Access controlled by the HOA. Residents couldn't enter. Only board-authorized maintenance, which meant they physically ordered someone to turn my gas off. On the coldest week of the year, I called the HOA emergency number. It went to voicemail. I called the property management company. After-hours service picked up. Yes, the board authorized a compliance enforcement action. You shut off my heat. Yes, sir. It's 15 degrees. The board considers the matter resolved once fines are paid and violation corrected. Resolved? My pipes will freeze. You're welcome to attend the next hearing. Next hearing? It was Tuesday, 5 days away. The house was cooling fast. Townhouses lose heat slower than single-family homes. But at 15 degrees, physics wins. I turned on the oven, opened the door slightly. Not safe long-term, but I needed something. I sealed windows with towels, closed vents in unused rooms, layered clothing. Then I checked the HOA bylaws, because something felt very wrong. Buried in the governing documents was a section titled Utility Services and Essential Access. It clearly stated, the association may not interrupt essential utility services to any dwelling except in cases of emergency repair or safety hazard. Unpaid fines? Architectural violations? Not listed. Meaning what they did wasn't enforcement. It was retaliation. You don't threaten someone's safety over patio furniture. You do it to prove power. And the board president loved proving power. Her name was Linda, retired corporate manager, ran HOA meetings like boardroom interrogations, loved phrases like, we must set precedent, and if we let one homeowner bend the rules. This wasn't about wood racks, it was about control. I checked my pipes, kitchen sink trickling, bathroom faucet dripping, trying to prevent freezing, but townhouses share walls. If my pipes burst, it wouldn't just affect me. Water damage spreads quickly. If my line ruptured, 3 neighboring homes could flood. And guess who would be liable? That thought changed everything. I called the gas utility provider directly, explained what happened. They checked the account. Gas wasn't shut off for non-payment. It was manually closed at the meter by authorized property access, meaning HOA personnel physically turned the valve. The rep paused. Sir, They're not supposed to do that for fines. I know. She documented it, told me to file a formal dispute, and then she said something important. If you regain access to the meter, you can legally reopen the valve. But I didn't have access. The enclosure was locked, HOA controlled. I could see my breath in the living room. I set up space heaters. Circuit breakers groaned. Townhouse wiring isn't built for emergency heating loads. And electricity rates in winter? Brutal. Then I remembered something. 3 months earlier, the HOA installed a centralized gas monitoring upgrade. They rerouted a section of main feed piping near the clubhouse for efficiency tracking. That meant the 42 homes shared a common gas distribution entry point before splitting into individual meters, which meant there was a master valve, accessible, outside the enclosure, for emergency shutoff, if they could shut off mine, and risk freezing shared plumbing infrastructure. What would happen if the master line had to be shut down, just temporarily, for safety inspection? My hands were numb. Anger keeps you warm for a while. Then reality sets in. This wasn't inconvenience. This was dangerous. At 32 degrees, pipes freeze. At 15 outside, that line comes fast. And if my pipes froze and burst, HOA insurance premiums would skyrocket. 42 homeowners would pay for one board's ego. That's when it stopped being personal. It became strategic. At 1:22 a.m., I drafted a message. Subject: Emergency risk notification, infrastructure liability. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't angry. It was calculated. I explained. Current indoor temperature, risk of pipe freeze, shared wall exposure, potential multi-unit water damage, HOA governing document clause violation, documentation of gas company statement. Then I added, if service is not restored immediately, I will be forced to take necessary steps to prevent broader infrastructure damage. Necessary steps, carefully chosen words. Then I sent it to board president, entire board, property manager, HOA attorney listed in disclosures. And I waited. No response. The house was officially unsafe. I packed a bag, moved valuables upstairs, prepared for evacuation. Then I grabbed my coat, because if they wanted to play with valves, I was going to look at the system myself. At 2:18 a.m., the wind felt like it had teeth. 15 degrees in R doesn't just chill you, it bites. The kind of cold that makes metal sting through gloves and turns breath into smoke instantly. I walked toward the clubhouse, not angry, not rushed, focused. Because this wasn't revenge. This was risk management. Behind the clubhouse, near the maintenance access wall, was the external emergency shutoff assembly the HOA installed during their gas monitoring efficiency upgrade. I knew about it because I attended that meeting. Linda had proudly explained how it would give the association better visibility and centralized control. Centralized control. Funny phrase. Mounted on the brick wall was a large industrial shutoff valve. Bright yellow, clearly labeled, main gas supply, emergency use only. From that valve, the gas line split underground to feed all 42 individual meters. If that valve closed, every single unit would lose gas. Heat, stoves, water heaters, fireplaces, everything. If my pipes froze, water could flood shared walls. If shared walls flooded, damage would cascade. If damage cascaded, HOA insurance would be triggered. If insurance triggered, premiums would spike. If premiums spiked, 42 homeowners would pay. Shutting off the master line for a controlled, documented safety inspection, that prevented uneven pressure stress in extreme cold. At least, that was the reasoning, and it wasn't entirely wrong. Extreme cold plus inconsistent gas flow can stress systems, especially if one line freezes while others run hot. But the real point wasn't physics. It was leverage. Before touching anything, I recorded video. Timestamp visible. Thermostat reading 41 degrees inside my home. Email thread visible. HOA violation notice. Gas company call log. Then I recorded the master valve. Explained the infrastructure layout. spoke clearly. Given the association's decision to terminate gas service to one unit in sub-zero temperatures, this creates uneven pressure and freeze risk across shared structural plumbing. Calm, measured, professional. Then I placed my gloved hand on the valve and slowly turned it. Gas systems don't scream when they shut down. They just stop. Furnaces cycle off. Pilot lights flicker out. Water heaters go quiet. Across 42 homes, heat began to drop. Not instantly, but gradually, just like mine had. My phone lit up. Property manager. I answered immediately. What did you do? Prevented infrastructure damage. You shut off the master gas line. Yes. You can't do that. Interesting, because you shut off mine. That was board authorized. And this is emergency risk mitigation. Silence. Then, turn it back on immediately. Restore my service first. You can't hold the community hostage. I'm preventing freeze damage. You're escalating. No, I'm equalizing. Her voice wasn't calm. It wasn't polished. It was panicked. Have you lost your mind? No. Do you understand what you've done? Yes. You've shut off heat to families. You shut off heat to mine. That's different. How? You were in violation. So freezing pipes is compliance enforcement? You're manipulating the situation. No, I'm exposing it. Silence. Heavy breathing. Then she said something she would regret. You will be personally liable for every damaged pipe in this community. I smiled slightly. Actually, that depends on documentation. Remember the email I sent? The one titled Emergency Risk Notification, Infrastructure Liability? It included explicit notice of freeze risk, shared wall exposure, infrastructure consequences. They ignored it, meaning they were formally notified before system instability occurred, meaning liability was already in motion. Group chat notifications started lighting up. Neighbors confused. Is anyone else's heat off? My stove just died. Water heater stopped. Within 20 minutes, the entire community knew something major happened, and they assumed it was HOA maintenance failure. Because who would imagine a resident touching the master valve? Linda texted, "If you do not restore service immediately, we are calling the police." I responded, "For what crime?" Tampering with utility infrastructure. Emergency valves are accessible for safety. You are not authorized. You weren't authorized to terminate essential utilities for fines. No response. Property manager called again. Voice calmer. Let's resolve this. Restore my gas. We can't until morning. You turned it off at night. That was different. You keep saying that. Pause. Fine. If we send maintenance to restore your meter first, will you reopen the master? Yes. Immediately? Yes. We're dispatching someone now. Maintenance truck arrived. I recorded everything. They unlocked the enclosure, turned my individual meter valve back on. Furnace reignited within minutes. Heat returned. Thermostat slowly climbing from 39 degrees F. Only once airflow stabilized. Did I walk back to the master valve? I turned the master valve back on. Gas pressure equalized. Across the neighborhood, furnaces roared back to life. Lights flickered as systems restarted. The crisis was over, but the damage, just beginning. Sunrise revealed something interesting. 3 homes reported pilot light issues. 2 had minor pressure alarms. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to cause concern. And concern leads to investigation. Investigation leads to questions. Questions lead to accountability. At 8:14 a.m., Linda sent an emergency notice. Due to unauthorized tampering with gas infrastructure, temporary disruption occurred overnight. The association is reviewing legal options. Unauthorized tampering. That phrase spread quickly. So did screenshots of my 1:22 a.m. email warning them. Neighbors began connecting dots. Why was one homeowner's gas off first? Why did the HOA have authority to shut off utilities? Why weren't residents informed? The narrative was shifting. Mid-morning, the gas provider contacted me. They had received multiple outage reports. I calmly explained. The association initiated non-emergency utility termination for compliance enforcement. There was a long pause. That's highly irregular. They asked for documentation. I sent everything. By noon, an inspector from the gas utility scheduled a site visit. Because master valves aren't toys, and HOAs don't typically have authority to weaponize gas service, especially in extreme weather conditions, Linda wanted control. Instead, she triggered oversight. By noon, the entire neighborhood felt different, not colder, tense. You could sense it in the way doors opened slower, in the way neighbors stood outside longer than usual, in the way conversations stopped when someone from the board walked past. Because once heat comes back on, people start asking questions, and questions are far more dangerous than cold. The gas utility truck pulled into the community with zero subtlety. Logo on the side, reflective stripes, 2 technicians, 1 supervisor, clipboards out. They didn't look annoyed, they looked serious, which is worse. Linda arrived 5 minutes later. Perfect hair, rigid posture, that corporate calm she used at HOA meetings. But this wasn't a boardroom, this was infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't care about authority titles. The supervisor asked simple things. Who authorized closure of individual service to Unit 18? Linda answered confidently. The board executed a compliance enforcement measure. The supervisor blinked. You shut off residential gas for fines? It's within our governing authority. Show me where. She couldn't, because it wasn't. He flipped through their management binder, then looked at the master valve. Who closed this at 2:34 a.m.? Everyone looked at me. I didn't step back. I did. Linda inhaled sharply. You admitted it. Yes. Why? Risk equalization. The supervisor raised an eyebrow. Explain. So I did. I calmly walked through. The unilateral shutoff of my unit, sub-zero temperatures, shared structural walls, pipe freeze risk, formal risk notification email, ignored escalation. I showed him timestamps, call logs, documentation. He didn't interrupt, he just nodded slowly. Then he said something no one expected. Neither of you should have touched these valves. Linda's face lit up slightly, until he continued. However, associations do not have authority to terminate essential utility service for non-payment of fines. Silence. He looked directly at her. That is considered unsafe utility interference in extreme weather conditions. Her posture cracked, slightly, but visibly. The utility company issued a formal incident report. It included improper non-emergency service termination, unsafe procedural execution, failure to notify utility provider, potential infrastructure liability. They didn't fine anyone, yet, but they documented everything, and documentation travels, especially to legal departments. By afternoon, screenshots were everywhere. My email, Linda's unauthorized tampering accusation, the inspector's visit. Neighbors started asking questions publicly in the HOA forum. Why was someone's heat shut off at 15? Is this legal? Could our utilities be shut off too? The board tried to moderate comments, delete threads, but people had already downloaded everything. And once residents realize power can be abused, trust evaporates fast. At 5:16 p.m., an emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7:30 p.m. Attendance mandatory for board, open to residents. You could feel the shift. This wasn't about a wood rack anymore. This was about authority. 42 homes. 38 showed up. That never happens. Usually HOA meetings have maybe 6 attendees. Tonight, standing room only. Linda sat at the front table, tight jaw, legal pad in front of her. The property manager beside her looked exhausted. I sat in the second row, quiet, not smiling, not angry, just present. We experienced an unfortunate incident involving unauthorized utility interference. Murmurs spread instantly. A neighbor raised her hand. Why was his heat off first? Linda hesitated. There was a compliance matter. Compliance with what? Architectural standards. You shut off heat over patio furniture? The room erupted. I stood up, calmly, opened the HOA governing documents, read the section on essential services, word for word. Silence fell. Then someone asked the property manager, "Did the board consult legal counsel before shutting off gas?" No. That one word shifted the entire room. Another neighbor spoke up. Last year, they threatened to suspend water access over late dues. Another. They fined me $300 for a mailbox color. Another. They denied my fence request without explanation. The pattern was forming. Control, escalation, no checks, and now, proof of overreach. One retired attorney in the community stood up. He had been quiet for years. Tonight, he wasn't. In my professional opinion, terminating essential utilities in sub-zero conditions exposes this association to negligence claims. He looked directly at Linda. You are fortunate no pipes burst. Silence. Heavy. Then it happened. A homeowner made a motion to initiate a vote of no confidence against the board president. Gasps. This wasn't common. HOA boards rarely get challenged publicly, but bylaws allowed removal with majority homeowner vote. And 38 were present. She tried. She really did. We must maintain standards. If we don't enforce rules, chaos follows. But the room wasn't cold anymore. It was awake. Standards don't override safety. Fines don't override heat. Power doesn't override common sense. Paper ballots, counted manually, in the same clubhouse where the master valve sat behind the wall. 34 votes for removal, 4 against. Linda stared at the number. 34. Out of 42 homes. Her authority ended that night, within a week. The architectural fine was voided. A new rule prohibited utility shutoffs for compliance. Access to master infrastructure required utility provider presence. Board transparency policies updated. Linda resigned fully from the association. And the storage rack? Still on my patio? Approved retroactively? The coldest night of the year? Brought the most clarity. They thought shutting off my heat would make me comply. Instead, it exposed a system built on intimidation. I didn't shut off gas to punish 42 homes. I shut it off to prove something simple. If you weaponize essential services, you better be ready for equal pressure. Months later, things are different here. Meetings are shorter. Discussions are calmer. The new board consults professionals before acting. And every time winter hits, someone inevitably jokes, "Check the valves." We laugh, but we all remember. Because power is easy to abuse, harder to defend, and impossible to keep. Once the heat turns against you,